Greetings, program. You have tuned into Renegade Files, your underground connection to fringe culture, unsolved mysteries, and paranormal experiences. You are now in the company of outcasts, and I'm your host, Lex Gordon, coming to you from the Jungle Villa Outpost, deep in the uncharted tropics. If you're new here, welcome. If otherwise, welcome back. I created Renegade Files almost 4 years ago as a high-quality podcast focused on unsolved mysteries, paranormal events, and covert culture, designed to provide fans of high strangeness with fun, informative entertainment. If that sounds cool to you, subscribe or follow us right now on your listening app so you can see when new episodes arrive, and be sure to check out the old episodes as well. If you've listened to more than 20 episodes and you'd like the show to continue, then you can help me do so by subscribing to our Patreon page. This will give you access to bonus episodes, my bizarre internet find posts, behind-the-scenes content, plus hours of extra information for each episode in the Dark Intel files. All of this is totally free for an entire week. Find the RFA agency on Patreon in 3 ways. 1, the Patreon link in the show notes. 2, the Patreon link at therenegadefiles.com. Or 3, go to patreon.com/renegadefiles. Choose the level that works best for you, and I'll see you in there. And I send deep gratitude to you. If you're an RFA agent on Patreon already, you've made this episode and every episode possible. Thank you so much. This is Renegade Files episode 87, the Westall UFO Event. This mass UFO sighting has been called Australia's Roswell. But modern UFO enthusiasts and researchers like me might argue that the incident is much more similar to the Ariel School Sighting than it is to our favorite Watershed, New Mexico crash and cover-up. We've had a bit of a long intro here already with my Patreon infomercial, so if you're back from signing up for your free week there, let's dive right into this glorious old-school UFO event, where the official story is far less believable than the eyewitness claims. All right. So what we're going to do here today is a freewheeling approach where I'm just going to go through my research and give this to you off the cuff and off the dome, as they say, a little looser, a little less formal. And so as such, if you could please just forgive me as I clunk around from tab to tab to give you the good stuff. I don't have a super clinical outline for today, but what I do have is a broad general plan, and that involves just going through the details for you in the beginning, giving you the what, who, when, and where. Sorry about that. Giving you the what, who, when, and where. I just got this new pop screen filter, and it has a big, long metal gooseneck sort of appliance that attaches it to the mic boom, and I keep hitting the thing. So if you hear that dunk sound, I'm going to try not to do it, but that's what that's about. I also have to adjust my chair, so once again, here we go. Raw and unfiltered, right? Okay. The other... Jeez Louise. Okay, so the other thing is, I'm not going to edit this to death either, so let's just forgive a little bit of that realness, right? All right, so this is an awesome story. It's one of my favorites. It parallels the Ariel School, as I said, and if you want to dig deeper into that, you can check out Renegade Files Episode 8, the Ariel School Alien Encounter, where we go deep into one of my favorite stories. This is a good one too. So the Westall UFO Event happened on April 6, 1966 in Melbourne, Australia. Objects were observed by multiple individuals, including students and teachers at the Westall High School. They reported seeing a flying object. It was described as round, metallic, with a dome top, silver or white in color, and it descended behind a row of trees and landed in what they call the Grange, which is an open area south of the school. So right away we have, as I said, the Ariel School parallels. Those being that this was a UFO or UFOs that were witnessed by students and that it landed in a sort of untamed area right outside of the school. If you describe that, you could be talking about either this or the Ariel School. Up to that point, same story, right? Very interesting. A lot of people have asked, why would UFOs land near a school? It's kind of obvious, right? They're landing in an area that's undeveloped. It's near a school. So it's almost like that looks like an obvious parking lot for them. And if they want to observe some people who are probably not threatening, a school is a good place to do it. You don't often hear them landing outside of a gun range or a military missile testing facility. If they're there to turn the missiles off. Those are other podcasts. Anyway, I digress. The point is, once again, just like Ariel, we have UFOs that come to a school and land just outside of it in an undeveloped sort of field. I guess the Grange is some kind of park where people go to camp. So witnesses see this object land. One person, whose name was Sean Matthews, was on vacation at the Grange, and he reported seeing an object with a slight purple hue, but he also said that it was kind of silver looking, and that it was, according to him, about the size of a family car. And just in a very generic way, some witnesses reported seeing the object take off again after landing. Some reported seeing it hover, and others said that it landed. Once again, these are paralleling the Ariel School stories, because in both of these cases, some people say it landed on the ground. Some people say it landed on legs that extended from the craft. That was in the Ariel School encounter. And others say that it just hovered just above the ground. These are all different interpretations of something that's basically the same thing. And those discrepancies, at least to me, are inconsequential when it comes to a story like this. It's not like one person said it was a giant cube and another person said it was a circular globe. You know, it's not like two obviously different descriptions, just basically two different interpretations of the same thing. So it either landed or it either hovered right at the bottom of the ground, and then it like zipped away. They watched it take off. Some of the students said that it was being followed by aircraft and that it easily evaded and outmaneuvered the aircraft. That's interesting. After it took off, students who had been close to it ran over and said that they saw round depressions in the grass, either pressed down or burnt. Air Force personnel and UFO enthusiasts visited the field later, and it is said that the landowner burned the field to discourage people from entering his property. That's kind of weird, right? I don't know. So a newspaper reported at the time that it was a weather balloon, or possibly a weather balloon, and right away, there we have parallel with, I guess, Roswell. But man, they love to bring out the weather balloon story, right? According to Ken Basterfield, a runaway balloon from the High Altitude Balloon Project used to monitor radiation levels is a likely explanation. That's sort of the official story, but we're going to get into that a little deeper later, so stay tuned. In either case, a weather balloon doesn't fit the descriptions of the people who were there that day. So they have a witness reunion, and it's held at a club near the area. I guess April 2006 was the 40th anniversary of the incident, and they had a little reunion of all the people or the people that saw it that cared to come to a reunion. And the city of Kingston has created a playground called the Grange Reserve UFO Park in commemoration of the event, and it features a silver UFO with red sides to reflect the 1966 Westall UFO incident, which of course they would get it wrong. No one ever said it was red. They said it was either silver, and one person said it had a purple cast. So anyway, it's kind of cool that they built a park with some UFOs for the kids to play on, maybe to keep the story alive. Interesting when they do things like that, right? So we're going to go through an article here which gets into some of the witness testimony. And this was written by a woman named Jewel Topsfield. It was published in 2011, and I'm reading it from the UFO Casebook, which is pretty cool old internet energy site. But this article has appeared in multiple places, reprinted online. It concerns a woman named Susan Savage. It tells us the general story, which we've already gone over. I'm going to skip to the Susan Savage part. Despite the many witnesses, exactly what happened on that day remains a mystery, the article says. Susan Savage, who was at the Westall School at the time, recalls Principal Frank Samblebe holding a special assembly, and after the meeting, she and her science class were returning and saw what they described as a classic saucer-shaped object fly overhead and descend into the Grange Reserve, and then once again take off and disappear into the sky. So before we move on, this brings up something that I want to point out. I'm not sure if it's really that important or not, but it's just interesting to me. And that is that this person, Susan Savage, who was a student at the time, tells us that the principal was holding an assembly. And after the assembly, on their way back to class, is when they saw this UFO. Okay? Now, what's interesting to me is that in the Ariel School, we also have a situation where the students had been let out for recess, and the principal took advantage of that time to gather the staff for a quick impromptu meeting. Okay? And then they would, after the meeting, go join the students at recess. Before they could, the students at recess saw this UFO land, and everybody freaked out and came running in to tell them about it as they were making their way out there, or as their meeting was wrapping up. I just find it interesting that in both of these cases, we have a UFO that was seen at a school that landed in a rural field just outside of and adjacent to the school. And when it did, the principals at both locations were having a meeting. One of them an official meeting, one of them an impromptu meeting, but the principal had gathered the staff, and I guess in the second case the students too. But it was right after this meeting that this event occurred. It's just weird to me. Just kind of cool, right? Another weird synchronicity. So the kids, I guess, ran to the principal and some of the teachers too, and told him what they had seen. And he basically said to them, according to Miss Savage, the principal said, quote, "I don't want to hear any more about this nonsense. We're not going to discuss it ever again." And so I guess the teacher didn't, and neither did the kids, at least to some degree. So it's interesting that the one official at the school, the head honcho there, said, "Nope, we're not going to talk about this. I don't want to hear anything more about it." So at the same time, Ian Cochran, who was also there, says that he believes the bizarre occurrence was a cover-up. Okay, he says that that he was one of the students that ran into the field and got an up-close look, or closer than some of the other students, of the crafts while they had landed, and he watched them take off. And I guess that following weekend on Saturday, him and his buddies went back out to the field, because he said when they saw the thing take off, they realized that it had left a circle in the grass. So they went out there on Saturday to check it out, and he said that it had been dug up, so that the grass had been dug up and was gone. That's very unusual, right? He's the one that believes there was a cover-up. I think that's a big part of why. I guess this would have been before the farmer burnt the field, or the landowner burnt the field. There was a bunch of speculation at the time as to what it could have been: a UFO from outer space, a secret military aircraft, some meteorological oddity, or a psychological phenomenon where people are influenced by each other to believe in something they really did not see. Okay, so those were some of the explanations that cropped up in the local papers. Those stories ran for a while, and then they sort of vanished, and no one ever talked about it for quite a long time. This is one of those things that people have always pointed to as being scrubbed, right? All that information was scrubbed from the internet. According to people who researched this early on, they said there was a bunch of information and that now it's gone. I was not one of those people. I've only recently looked into this, and I find a little bit about it, mostly some Fortean sites, and one of them we'll get into later. But these official, or at least speculative, answers or explanations always follow kind of a pattern. Of course, we're always going to have the balloon rear its head. UFO, that's the leading headline, right? That gets people to read the paper, sells the papers. And then they follow up and say, well, it could have been a secret military aircraft. It could have been like ball lightning or whatever. They love that one. Or it could have been a psychological phenomenon where people were influenced by others to believe in something they didn't really see. This is what they call mass hallucination. It's also called mass hysteria when it involves a sort of panic component. But something I've noticed, and maybe this is just my amateur opinion, but it does seem to hold some water, is that these explanations of mass hallucination or mass hysteria are always something that's applied after the fact, way late to the table, right? You don't ever hear a story of someone saying, 50 people saw a UFO, and it was the 50 people on that side of the street that were all standing together and mass hallucinating, and all of us on the other side of the street were saying, what are you fools looking at? And they're all mass hallucinating, saying, look, it's a UFO, and we're looking up and not seeing anything. And all of us said, you guys are all mass hallucinating. You don't ever hear that. That's never how a mass hallucination explanation comes to pass. The explanation and the debunking of a mass hallucination is always applied after the fact by these armchair debunkers, and to me, it just means nothing. I really don't even know if there's such a thing as mass hallucination. Is there? Not that I know of, maybe, but it's always applied after the fact, right? Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't such a thing as groupthink, and there isn't such a thing as this sort of cult mind phenomenon where 200 people will all kill each other. I don't know. There's weird things going on out there. I'm not saying that it's impossible. All I'm saying is that in my experience of researching a lot of UFOs, anytime we get this explanation of a mass hallucination or mass hysteria, it's always sort of hindsight. Okay, so we have other people that are still researching the case. Some people say that it was obvious that something was seen and that the government didn't really want the story to get out. No one's really sure. There's a guy whose name is Shane Ryan. Shane Ryan has interviewed more than 300 people connected with the case, and according to his research, 89 people were there and actually saw the UFO that day. 138 people saw the depression or the burnt area in the grass. And he says that several people say that police and men in military uniforms blocked off the area to the landing site. And some of those men interviewed people at the school and basically told them, you're not allowed to talk about this because it involves national security. What you saw was some secret military thing. And a lot of those people took it to heart and never did. Another interesting part to this story is we have our old friends, the Men in Black, showing up. According to several accounts, men wearing black suits, white shirts, and black ties, wearing black fedoras and sunglasses, and I guess they could have just said Men in Black, arrived at the school within the week or during that same week when it happened. This happened on a Wednesday, okay? So before the weekend, these Men in Black show up at the school, and they talk to several of the teachers, I guess the principal, and they talk to some of the students as well. They basically tell them the same thing that the military officers told them on the very day or the day after, which was, you didn't see anything, and if you did, you're not going to talk about it, and if you do, you're going to be in deep trouble. And that story comes to us from multiple witnesses who came out later over the years and independently and apart from each other described the same exact thing. Okay, so what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that these Men in Black seem to show up after UFO events. It's kind of a cliche almost at this point, but it shouldn't be discounted. It's fascinating to me. Another thing that brings up is this idea of what I have called and coined the term of a pop culture smokescreen. So that happens when something in the sort of paranormal world is given the Hollywood treatment to distract the real research from it. Men in Black being the classic example. We did a whole show on pop culture smokescreens. You can go back and check that one out. It was a really fun one to do. And basically the classic example is the Men in Black movie. So if you want to know how a pop culture smokescreen works, just go into your favorite search engine and type in Men in Black and look at how many pages of articles about the movie and pictures of Will Smith in sunglasses do you have to scroll through before you ever find a paranormal article about the Men in Black phenomenon, right? So this pop culture product muddies the waters. Okay, and it makes research very difficult and increasingly almost impossible, so that it's so hard to dig past the pop culture smokescreen, as it were. We have that in this case because we have a very clear-cut description of what can only be called Men in Black showing up at the Westall school and doing what they do, right? So let's just cruise on through this UFO casebook article a little bit more. One of the people, I guess this would also be Mr. Ryan, he says, quote, "I'm so frustrated after all these years, I can't get an official answer about why the powers that be were there that day and why they didn't want the students to talk about what they saw." So he's referring to the military men, not the Men in Black. It's very interesting. He says that this situation is that he's unable to find any of those military personnel or the police who were there that day, and he can't find any documents, he can't find any notes, and he just finds that weird because everything else you look into, there's paper trails a mile long. But for this, not only can he not find any of those men who were there that day, he can't find any evidence of them ever being there, which is highly unusual when you're talking about a military who likes to document everything, at least according to him. This is going to bring us to another article, which is called The Westall UFO Encounter, Australia's 1966 Schoolyard Sighting. And this is published in Australian Unwrapped, and that is by an author called Zudi Zell. And if that's not a pen name, it's the coolest real name I've ever heard. Zudyzel, first and last name, Zudi Zell, who would have been the last person called enroll in her school for her entire life. So here we have her telling us basically what we already know about the article, but what this writer has done, which I find very interesting, is divide some of the disparate research and condense it into a very well-organized sort of bullet point article that gathers all of that stuff and puts it into a sort of cool account. So what she has here is the witness statements, then why the Westall UFO encounter is so significant. She has 3 points there, and then some investigation and theory that we'll go over, and then the role of some of the testimony and how the modern interest has sort of cropped back up about this. I'm not going to read it word for word, and once again, this is in the Dark Intel files, so you can find this article there if you want to read the whole thing for yourself, but she gives us a little deeper information here. One of the things that she tells us is that according to the accounts, it was a sunny Wednesday morning when the sight occurred. So that's something that we don't get in some of the general notes about this. So in other words, it was a clear, sunny day. That's kind of important. She says that students were outside on a break when they noticed a silver disc-shaped object. That's consistent with what we've heard, and that they described it as metallic and about the size of a car with no visible windows or markings. So the no visible windows or markings, that's sort of some added information for us. She reminds us that one of the witnesses says that it was purple in color or had a purple hue to it. We remember that. But she adds that that person says that it was making a wishing sound or like a whirring. I don't know. It's hard to say those words. whirring, whirring sound as it moved. That might be the only report of it making a noise. That's kind of unusual. The incident lasted roughly 20 minutes before the object ascended and disappeared at high speed. So that's kind of cool to know too. So she asks the question, why is the Westall UFO encounter so significant? And then she gives 3 reasons. 1, the number of witnesses. Unlike many UFO sightings, this encounter was observed by a large and diverse group of people. The sheer number of witnesses makes it difficult to dismiss as a hoax or a hallucination. And I would agree. And she's making the point about the mass hallucination that I just did. So very interesting. Another thing that she tells us, or at least her opinion as to why this encounter is so significant. Number 2, it's a daytime sighting. Many UFO sightings occur at night, and that makes it easier to misinterpret something natural or like a light on a plane or something. You see a light in the sky at night could be a lot of things. This is a broad daylight sighting of something that people can identify as being saucer shaped and metallic with a dome on top. It doesn't get any more UFO than that, okay? And so that adds credibility to the account, at least according to this author, and I would agree. Number 3 on her list of what makes this encounter so significant is the official silence. So she says many witnesses recall being visited by the authorities, both military and civilian, and I think the civilian would be her reference to the men in black, who allegedly warned them not to discuss the event. This aspect has fueled speculation about a cover-up. No kidding. So I would agree with that assessment as well, that this has those 3 hallmarks. You know, it's like it's a mass sighting, it was broad daylight, and then officially you're not allowed to talk about it. So that leans pretty heavily to the UFO side, right? Some of the investigations and theories in the immediate aftermath, like we've talked about already, they said that it was possibly a balloon. We'll get into that a little deeper here coming up. Someone who dismantles that idea. The idea is that it could be an extraterrestrial craft, that's obvious. It could be a secret military experiment. So some researchers believe that the craft was a classified military aircraft from the Australian Air Force. It's possible, obviously. And that could also account for why the official position was don't talk about it, right? Loose lips sink ships, that kind of thing, okay? So the last two things that she talks about here are something we've already touched on, the weather balloon and the mass hysteria. Like I said, we'll get into the weather balloon coming up, so stay tuned. The mass hysteria thing, group dynamics, suggestibility can lead to misperceptions, yes, but as this author points out, this explanation struggles to account for the consistency of the witness testimonies. So basically, everyone is seeing the same thing. And I guess she concludes that what are the chances that they would hallucinate the same thing? It's kind of another argument against the mass hysteria. So then she goes on to tell us the role of the witness testimonies. So Joy Clark is someone who was a student there, and she gives vivid details of the craft, emphasizing that it was unlike anything she had ever seen before. She insists that it was physical craft. She says that it was metallic, that it had no windows or doors, and that she watched it land and watched it take off. She said that there were other students close to it. That corroborates some of the stuff that we'll get into here in a minute. And this is someone who comes across as incredibly credible and has stuck to her story for decades. So then there's also the science teacher named Mr. Greenwood, and he reports seeing the object. He says it was metallic, a disc. He said it hovered before darting away at what he says was, quote, an unbelievable speed. So that once again falls into the several aspects that do or don't make something a legitimate extraterrestrial craft. If it's performing maneuvers or moving at speeds that are beyond what we understand as the laws of physics or conventional aircraft, right? Now, at the same time, that might lean into the secret military thing. Who knows what they've got? They have drones the size of a fly, right? There's certainly things that we don't know about that the military is capable of. Maybe we got a glimpse of it on that day. It's absolutely possible. This person points to the 2010 documentary called Westall 66, a suburban UFO mystery, and gives that credit for reigniting public interest in the event. And she also says that recent calls for government disclosure in general have brought this case back into the public eye. She says it deserves further investigation, and I would agree. And I would also point out that the recent government transparency movement hasn't really yielded a lot. It's yielded a 6-page, $2 million document that doesn't tell us anything, and a bunch of sort of testimony in front of Congress that, if you watch them, also don't tell us anything, right? The most we get is, I was in the military and I knew a guy who said that we have a UFO. Who's the guy? I can't tell you. Well, that's no different than me saying a little birdie told me. You know, it just accomplishes nothing. You're going to go in front of Congress to say that? I don't know. I have strong opinions about that. I've done a few episodes on the disclosure movement, and maybe we'll get into it deeper again, because I think there's something more going on there than the government finally telling us what they know about UFOs. The reason I think that is because the government is not finally telling us what they know about UFOs. If you pay attention to any of those disclosure products that we've gotten, they're all just the same runaround. It's nothing new. It's just new names. So maybe we'll get into that coming up. Or maybe it's already been done so much that nothing to see here, move on. I'm not sure. But anyway, my point is, I think there's something else going on there, and that the current disclosure movement isn't exactly what it seems like on the surface. Just IMHO, okay? So that's going to be it. We're not going to dive into the rest of this witness accounts. We've already done it. We know why it's significant. We know what happened there, and it's really cool. It's just this author, Zudi Zell, gives us a good summary of the whole thing with some added information, which I always appreciate. So the final field we're going to land our UFO in is going to be a kooky little place called New Dawn Magazine. And I don't mean to make light of it. It's really cool. It is an old school Fortean publication, a real magazine, most of it available online. It's been around since 1991, and their tagline is Ancient Wisdom, New Thinking. And it is touted as the #1 magazine for people who think for themselves, and there is a lot of good information in what they do there. Not the least of which is this article by Bill Chalker entitled The 1966 Westall Incident, Refuting the Official Explanation. So I'm going to go through this, and just bear with me here because I'm not going to read the whole thing, and a lot of this we've gone over before, but there is some serious analysis in here and some classic debunking of the debunking kind of thing going on here. So, as I said, just be a little bit patient because I want to give you the information, but I don't want to bore you to death. We're just going to skim right through it. But let's see here. Okay, so I'm going to go through some of this because I want you to get a feel for the high level of sort of intellectual debunking that Chalker is giving us in this article. It's really cool. So he tells us that a Melbourne Herald Sun journalist, Mark Dunn, wrote a story published on August the 6th, 2014 with the headline, UFO All Hot Air, Westall Was a Balloon. Okay? That's the headline of Dunn's article. But Chalker tells us there is no evidence of any original research being done by the journalist, that's Dunn, and it's entirely based on research done by long-term researcher Ken Basterfield that we talked about. And so he quotes the article just to give us an idea here. He says, this is from the article, okay? An almost 50-year-old mystery when more than 200 people believed they had a close encounter with a UFO landing in Clayton may have finally been solved after a newly unearthed government document reveals a secret radiation testing program. End quote. Okay, so Chalker tells us that the Highball program was not conducted in secret at all. And at the time of the Westall incident, it was openly reported in newspapers from at least 1965 and well beyond 1966, so that we would have known about this program both before and after the event. So that's very interesting. So he's calling out this Mark Dunn and saying that his claim that this event has finally been solved because we have a newly unearthed government document that reveals a secret program, and Chalker's saying that's not true. It wasn't secret at all. It was reported on before and after the incident. So that's just getting our toes in the water here. He goes on to tell us from the article, quote, although federal and state government agencies refused to comment about the 1966 Westall incident at the time, it is now believed that, rather than a UFO, what landed was an errant, high-altitude balloon used to monitor radiation levels after the controversial Maralinga nuclear tests. Okay, end quote. That's enough of that. So, what Chalker tells us is, however, no official documents have been found that refer to any Highball launch at the Westall area in April of 1966. So no documents have been found to confirm that a launch took place. So he goes on to quote the article and tells us, in the article it says, quote, after hovering over the area, the balloon landed in an area known as the Grange, behind a grove of pine trees, before taking off again and being pursued by several light aircraft in a sighting which lasted 20 minutes. Okay, end quote. So fine. What Chalker is telling us is that hardly sounds like the behavior of a helium balloon. A helium balloon doesn't really land on its own and then take off again. It's impossible. A balloon floats until there's no more helium, then it lands. That's kind of how a balloon works. It doesn't land and take off again, and it doesn't make any sense. And Chalker's calling the guy out over it, right? So let me go down here. Okay, I'm not going to go through this whole thing because it's very technical, but I'm just going to paraphrase it, okay? And that's fine. That works for us. So what Chalker goes on to tell us is that Ken Basterfield, who's the guy who originally came up with this balloon idea, says that there was language built into some of the later projects or the highball project at a later date, which would indemnify, if possible, the government agencies from anyone getting injured if one of these balloons got away and fell on somebody. Okay, and in that language, they reference a balloon that was recovered safely, and that would be their goal, and that he says, according to him, that no mention of the Westall School balloon falling, since no one was hurt, being in that report is an indication that one never fell there. Now, I do have a little bit of an issue with that. It's not that I totally disagree with the guy, but the absence of that story in those documents really doesn't indicate the fact that it didn't happen. Right? Just because they didn't say or specifically reference the Westall balloon as crashing, that doesn't mean it didn't crash. You can't prove something that didn't happen kind of thing, right? With the absence of a reference to it. I don't know. It just seems like a little bit of, I wouldn't say circular logic, but like hopeful kind of logic. Him saying that it must not have happened because they didn't say it did, right? It's not a huge miss, but just keeping it real, okay? So that basically wraps up what's going on here. It's a really cool story, has a lot of parallels to the Ariel School, like I mentioned, and it's one of those things where the official story of a balloon doesn't add up. We have military people going into the school and saying, this never happened, keep your mouth shut. Why would they if it was a weather balloon? You see what I'm saying? This is a case of the debunkers wanting to have their cake and eat it too. Okay? And then what we have is this article pretty late in the game saying that, it was a balloon, but it was a secret balloon. And it was a secret project. But then Chalker telling us, no, that's not true. We have articles and we have documents that support that everyone knew about Operation Highball before and after, shortly after this incident at the Westall School. So it wasn't a secret mission with the balloons. It was well known. And if it was, then we would have known that's what it was. The other thing is, people aren't describing a balloon here. They're saying looked like a saucer. It was metal. It was silver. Maybe it glowed purple. It landed and we watch it take off. We have the one kid. Let me find him again too. I'm not sure if I mentioned him or not. It was the boy. I'm searching for it right now. Forgive me. Okay, here we go. Victor Zachary. All right, he was another student. He says that the UFO landed and that he watched it land and he ran over to it, and that several other students did as well. A bunch of kids stayed back on the fence and watched them do this, and that he ran right up to one of them as it was in the field over the grass, and that he got close enough that he could touch it, and he almost touched it, and then it says, quote, he thought better of it. So he sort of said, slow your roll, maybe not touch this thing, you don't know what it is. And he backed away, and he said as he was backing away, he noticed that 3 other kids were very close to the other one. They were several yards apart, these 2 crafts. And he said that when they flew away, they realized that the ground had been burned in a circle there, and that I don't know if he was the same one, but I think so, that they sort of went away, and then when they came back to check out the burn marks, they had been dug out, and then a few days later the farmer just burned all the grass to keep people out of his property, because all these people kept showing up to check it out. So that's a really cool story. You don't hear a lot about that, right? That's not reported in a lot of other places. This is in the New Dawn magazine article, pretty deep into it. So he also says that Victor made a report to what would be called the Victorian Flying Saucer Research Society, and that at the time I guess he gave them a photo of this area that had the marks in it. All that stuff has been washed away. No one can find any of it anymore. The only thing we have is Bill Chalker's drawings based on Victor Zachary's descriptions. He made those in 2008. We do have drawings made at the time by a young Victor Zachary, and his drawings of the UFO are just cool. He shows a view of it from the bottom looking up at it, because he said he got a good view of it when it took off, and it looks like a circle with like a little ring and 3 dots, and it's just, I don't know, classic UFO stuff, right? He also has a profile from the side view of it, no windows, what looks like a metallic dome, and it matches exactly not just his description but everyone else's description there, right? Described it as approximately 5.5 meters wide and 1.5 meters tall. So that's right in the ballpark of like a small automobile, I guess. It's really cool. There also was another similar encounter in an area called, let's see, what is it? Well, it just says a neighboring suburb of Melbourne, and that it was on the outer edges of the city, and that they also witnessed just days before craft that have the exact same description. These metal saucers with no windows. The point is, a lot of this stuff came out early on, but it's just gone. It's been wiped away. It's one of these things, like if you go look up Ariel School, you'll find a lot of information, because that's been researched a lot lately. And there was, a Harvard psychologist who interviewed the kids, and all of his stuff is matters of public record, as well as the people who have gone back and interviewed the students now that they're grown, and they made a whole movie about it. This situation, the Westall incident, not so much. It's one of those weird things that there's a gap in the information. It makes it hard to do the research on it, but it makes it very rewarding when you do find things like the story of Zachary, that he ran up and could touch it, kind of thing. That also parallels the Ariel School, and I may have mentioned it already, but where you have a bunch of kids run over to this thing, and most of the other kids kind of hanging back and just watching, so that you have the witness reports of the kids that are back watching it, and the witness reports of the kids that ran up and got closer to it. That happened in both Ariel and Westall. So it's very cool, super cool. This is one of my favorite stories. I don't have a huge conclusion here, because it's just more questions than answers, one of those kind of things. But I really appreciate you coming along for this, and thanks for being flexible and letting me do a little freewheeling version of it. I like that every now and then. It's kind of fun. So thank you so much, and it was really fun. I hope you liked it. All right. Thank you so much for investigating the Westall UFO event with me. Subscribe to or follow Renegade Files right now, so together we can meet here again next time to explore the deepest covert stories where logic clashes with the official narrative. I am so happy to have you in the Renegade Files crew. One final thing I want to mention. Be sure to come back every Friday for the rest of this month to catch the Renegade Files Short Drives episodes, which are my presents to you for being a fan of the show. Those are shorter, like 20 or 25 minutes, and they're more of a story format, and they look into strange stuff in fun ways. I originally planned to publish 13 of them on every Friday in June, July, and August. But what happened was that the weekly releases combined with the bi-weekly bigger episodes have confused the algorithm and resulted in a weaker reach, which is, to be quite frank, the opposite of my intended effect. So I'm trying to grow the show, not slow the show. So what I'm going to do is, for the August short drives, so that's the last 5 short drives episodes, I'm going to post them as totally free posts available for anyone to play on our Patreon page. This is not a trick. This is a little bit of a trick. No, I'm just kidding. It's really not. Anyone can just go there and listen to them without signing up for anything at all. And I'll just make them free for public view. And that way you can hear the shows and I won't confuse the almighty algorithm. I'm still going to put the last Friday ones up in July, but for August, they're going to go on Patreon and they'll be free and they'll be public, so you can just go and hear them there. I'm only human and we all make mistakes. And I thought for sure that 6 episodes a month would drive more traffic than 2 a month. And as it turns out, I was wrong. But I still want to make the episodes for you, so that's my solution. I'm just going to put them up. The last ones for August are going to be on Patreon. I'll code them as public and free, and you and anyone else can listen to them there. Once again, thank you so much for checking out the Westall UFO event with me. Safe travels and shake and bake. I'm your host, Lex Gordon. Stay wild, yacht rock child.